Hi, I'm Kane. Welcome to One on One, where my guest today is Hugh Pavlich. Welcome, Hugh. Let's start right at the top. You've been a bit tough on the City Council, accusing them of blindness and blunders and chain dragging. What's happening?
Well, I think instead of being tough on the City Council, I think more direct would be the word we could use, Joe. And this has gone on for a very, very long time, going back to the time when I was president for the Property Council down here in the South Island. And I've always taken a great interest in the council. But the problem really started when we had amalgamation some 20 years ago, and where we lost these smaller councils, which I thought were very, very important, and we moved towards a centralised model. And as I see it, that's created massive problems for the community over the last 20 years.
You don't like the centralised model. You think it's all about the small communities. And we've just had this big announcement today from the Prime Minister about what's going to happen to those in the red zone. You've had a lot of experience in affordable housing, and the question I need to ask you is, where are those zones in Christchurch?
There are simply really none of them, Joe. That's a sad thing. Of course, we need to, if you don't mind me saying so, just correct the red zone. We're talking about the people out in the east.
The residential red zone.
That's correct, that's correct. And where do they go? Where is the affordable housing on the good land for them to go? It's simply not there. Now, the problem that we have is that we've got sections out on the fringes for about 200 to 300 odd thousand, and they should only be, if you like, something in order of $30,000 to $60,000 a lot out on the fringes, so that people can get housing up for about 140, 160,000. So what I'm stressing at the moment to the government is the importance of getting as much land opened up as possible to get these far more affordable sections in.
Well, there's been two processes. There was the Greater Urban Strategy, the Greater Christchurch Strategy, and then the September earthquake. Is someone dragging their chains here? Because this hasn't been done, and it wasn't announced today.
No, it wasn't, and there's a very long history to all this. What's happened as the councils became amalgamated in Christchurch, and I need to go back really 20 years here, is that the council became very, very bureaucratised. We've got 1,300 people in the Hereford Street office. If you ask me what they all do all day, I couldn't tell you, and it's really just quite hopeless. So what we've been doing, instead of spending money on infrastructure, we've been spending it on the growth of the great bureaucracy in Hereford Street. So the council hasn't been able to cope with growth. So my view is that we need to move more down towards the smaller local authorities, get local government into the community by getting community service centres set up around the city, and just have a very small central office, so that people are a lot closer to their own community local government. So that's where I'm sort of aiming for, and if you like, so that we get rid of this bureaucracy, so that we can afford to spend money on infrastructure and start getting sections and affordable sections in on the fringes, so that people can get housing at below 200,000 all up with the section and the house.
It's an interesting word, this bureaucracy. When you actually have a look at what Canterbury has now, it's almost 6 levels of governance. We've got the government, we've got Jerry Brownlee as a minister with special powers, we've got Sarah, we've got a government-controlled environment, Canterbury, and we've got the City Council. I mean, you're asking for sound political leadership. Is that possible to work under this mix and to get these decisions made?
Well, of course, the reason Sarah was set up in very large measure, Joe, was because the City Council is dysfunctional. And we saw that just following the earthquake event. Many of us developers knew for years, because we're dealing with the council. Most people think the council's all pretty okay or whatever, but it's a different kettle of fish if you're having to deal with them every day of the week. And then you learn a lot more about how they really function. And they haven't been functioning very well for a very long time. So that's really the major sort of problem we've got, and we've got to get it back down to these smaller units of local government so that people know what's going on. Like, does anybody in Christchurch really know what's going on in that Hereford Street office? I certainly don't.
Well, I'd like to know what's going on with an office that's just been built. However, we won't go there today. But Bob's baby was this Greater Urban Design Strategy, and it put a lot of the new growth actually on the east side. Now, we know what's happening on the east side. What is your thinking behind where are these people going to relocate to now And how can they afford to do it?
And of course, it goes back even earlier than the urban growth strategy as well, which only came in 2007.
Yes.
So the City Council itself had been strangling land supply for a very long time, and actually forced, if you like, the housing over into the bad ground on the eastern side of the city, which is generally considered the least favourable part, for real estate.
Cheaper, are you saying?
Yeah, that's
cheaper
right.
type of land?
Cheaper type of land in a sense, but if you like, if we had the market totally open, the city would naturally move to the west and to the south. People would keep away from that bad sort of land. The unfortunate thing is that they really forced the developers out there because they restricted the supply of land so much. So these poor fellows had to develop on that type of ground. There was no research done at all, as I recall, on the geotechnical or the liquefaction aspects of that ground. It's a very sorry case.
Would you be concerned that Preston's Road has got this question mark over it, and you might look at it and think Marshlands Road should give you a clue? Are you concerned about an announcement that might be made about Preston's Road?
Well, I am very sure that people do not need any reminding from me to look very carefully at the ground that they're going to be building their new homes on after what the events that we've all been through. I think that you'll find if they open the ground up around Christchurch, the first question any buyer of land will be asking is that stable, good ground? One of the things that really amazes me, Joe, is just how well Rolleston, for example, took the earthquakes, bearing in mind that it was right at the end of the major fault, the Darfield fault, which experienced a 7.1 magnitude shake. So, and if you could drive out to Rolleston, I don't think you'd know that there'd been an earthquake there. But even as we come closer to the city, out towards that way, or out towards West Melton, the ground is very, very good out there, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be building houses flat out that part of the country.
Okay. So you're effectively saying that the planning documents that Christchurch and Canterbury has at the moment are quite flawed in the execution that they needed to put people in safe places.
That's correct, Joe, but I'd even go further than saying flawed. I would say completely irrelevant. Will it be irrelevant if Ngāi Tahu, who is a major property player now and touting on that east side for that development of Preston Road, do you have confidence that we're all playing on a level playing field? That's something that's always concerned me, of course, for a very long time. They do get favoured treatment. We all know that. They get first crack at Crown land, and the prices they pay are very interesting, to say the least, for a lot of the stuff. But what concerns me more is that Minister Brownlee and Mr Sutton make sure that we get sufficient land opened up on the fringes so that everybody can have a fair go, and we don't have favoured ones such as, well, possibly Ngāi Tahu or anyone else for that matter.
But they haven't. We've had 10 months since the September earthquake, special powers in Canterbury, very, very wide-sweeping legislation, and yet there wasn't even any answers today as where are these people all going to move to?
I know, and soon after that first event I wrote an article called Christchurch, a Bureaucratically Buggered City, which is up on my website, and also at that same time, I was really... I was in the New Zealand Herald exhorting, if you like, the government to immediately get onto opening up land, which is something they should have done years ago. Nick Smith, the Environment Minister's had been hammered by me for years on this, that they should have had land opened up, and there's been nothing done in something 9 to 10 months. So
okay, we'll come back to the land that needs to be opened up right after this break. Welcome back. Hugh, what's the biggest problem that Roger Sutton has in trying to work with the egos and the power struggles that invariably manifest themselves when in this rebuild and the time frames they're established?
Well, Roger is a very experienced manager, so he will know to keep a very cool head about all of this and to think in terms of what the priorities are. I have a lot of confidence in Roger, provided that he pulls the right people in around him with skill sets that he may not have himself. And he's got to get rid of those bureaucrats out of there, because that's it's only just going to hold things up further. So really what Roger has to focus on, in my view, are two key issues. Firstly, getting the land opened up on the fringes. Well, we should really say three. The land opened up on the fringes as quickly as possible so we can start getting affordable housing into this, around the fringes of the city. And when I talk about affordable, Joe, I mean housing at around about the $200,000 all up. That's $50,000 for a section and about $150,000 for the house. The second priority is really to get into this council and start on the reformation process of that. And we've got to move away from the centralised model to the one city, many communities approach. And thirdly, of course, there's a CBD to shrink that cordon as quickly as possible to get to allow businesses to re-establish in there as quickly as possible.
So what does Sarah need to do to ensure that there is a much improved regulatory and recovery performance? I mean, it has all the legislation there. What will it have to do to make sure that we lift the game to get some of these decisions made quite quickly?
Well, the major problem that really Sarah has is, if you like, a cultural problem within the City Council. We found out after the first event back in September, didn't we, that as soon as people, there was legislation passed there giving them quite big powers, and people were told, business owners and property owners were told in particular, get on and fix your problems and worry about the consents later. What did the Christchurch City Council do? They said, if you try that on, you'll never get a consent. So they just countermanded straight off the orders, if you like, from central government. Now, those days, I sincerely hope, are well and truly over. So we've got a big, big political culture problem within that council, and the only way to fix that is to get rid of that 1300 bureaucracy, and I don't know what they'll do all day, at Hereford Street when that failed building is sorted out. And also, if you like, get them out into the community, into these community service centres where we can all keep a better eye on them.
Do we run the risk, or does Sarah run the risk of the council abrogating its responsibility by expecting Sarah to do what they're elected to do and what they're actually rated to do? That's
exactly it. And if you like, Minister Brownlee and Mr Sutton will be acutely aware of that. They don't need to have that, me reminding them of that. Their major role, as I said before, is to really bring this council back to health. In other words, restructure the thing so that we all know what's going on and we can see whether the people in it are performing or not. What I want to see happen is to see, if you like, the one city, many communities model put in place, where we have 5 service centres around the city with one central office, and then we've got one out at Littleton, another at Akaroa as well. But where, if you like, people in those communities can really sort of see what is going on.
But isn't that the community board? I mean, we already have those community boards that that probably need to step up. But you're talking about bureaucracy, and we still have these huge decision making in isolation from each other. We've got the minister, we've got Sarah, we've got the regional council, we've got the city council.
Yeah.
How is that going to work? I mean, there's some very big decisions and a lot of work to be done, and there's all these pockets.
Well, the recovery, Joe, is only going to happen here at the local level when we sort ourselves out at the local level. You know, if we're going to sit around and wait for Wellington to help us, sorry guys, that isn't going to happen.
But haven't the communities been really, they've been really resilient?
I've got a huge regard for them.
Waited patiently while there's been constant over-promising and under-delivery.
That's exactly
Don't they deserve better?
Of course they deserve better, but they won't get better until we start getting the structure in place where, if you like, council and these other agencies can actually service people at the local level. As we found out after the first shake, for heaven's sake, the council was in no position to respond. Its new building had been knocked out. It wasn't even, I don't believe, built to modern code as far as seismic and structural aspects of it are concerned. Now, I could be proven right or wrong on that, but I've been asking for the last 9 or 10 months for information on that building, and I still haven't got it. That is a huge concern, that whole building. But the fact of the matter is that centralised model with its building knocked out simply couldn't do its job. So what we've learned from that, you know, this is, if you like, risk management, and very, very elementary risk management, that you don't have everything in all your eggs in one basket. You don't have everything centralised. What you do is you make sure that it's spread out around the city, so that if we do have another event or whatever, and we have one service centre knocked out, it doesn't mean the whole council's knocked out.
Do you think that the centralised model that you're not a fan of, are we using it anywhere in New Zealand? Is there a good example of where that works?
Well, unfortunately, it looks like the Aucklanders have just sort of walked off the cliff on this whole issue, as we did 20 years ago. They apparently haven't learned a thing, and I simply cannot understand Mr Hyde even allowing that to happen. But voters hopefully will be aware of that great blunder in Auckland. It has been a failure here, Joe. The sad reality is that Christchurch has been getting shabbier over the last 2 decades. I think for most of us who have been around here for a long time, we can sort of see it happen. It's been a city that hasn't been performing. Now, for example, our medium household incomes here in Christchurch are just about 55,000. In the east of the city, they're only 45,000. In the west, about 65. But in Auckland, they're about 70,000. You know, so people can just go to Auckland, for example, and earn 25% more.
So the model of affordable housing that you're talking about is based on that medium income.
That's
and you
right.
mentioned, you know, that we should be able to buy sections for 50,000. Yeah, right. But how could that be facilitated? Isn't there an opportunity now to do exactly that?
That's exactly what we have to see happen, Joe, and fast, and should have actually happened, as I said before, following the September event, if the politicians, that's being Mr Key, Mr Brownlee and Mr Parker, had their eyes open to what was needed. That was critically important to get, if you like, activity back into the system, into the city quickly, and if you like, maintain morale. But they never really grasped that, unfortunately. We've got to at least start doing it now.
Isn't it always about the dollar? You know, that the developer wants to capitalise on the piece of land he's bought.
I mean, really, no.
Is this where you're talking that there's an opportunity now for them to actually get on the front foot and have true affordable housing?
Well, we'd have to say belatedly, Joe, because I mean this goes right back to September and even a lot earlier than that. I've been pressing for this now for the last 7 or 8 years. What I must say is I was pressing for this issue too back in the early 90s back here in Christchurch. And I tell you, a great guy at the time was Councillor Charles Manning, who was chairman of the Environment Committee here at the Christchurch City Council. Charles is really a great character and a man with a great conscience. And he could see the need for the opening up the land. And through that whole era, thanks to Charles Manning, the people of Christchurch want to be very grateful. It was thanks to him that the house prices were held at about 150,000.
We'll hold that point just there and come back straight after the break. Welcome back. Now, Hugh, some of this land is tied up in the Environment Court. And I don't understand why it is. I want to know your feelings about that, because the legislation means that we could cut through this process way more effectively.
Of course we could. This is just basically a fee-farming, bureaucratic exercise in the trough as far as I'm concerned, Joe, a lot of this stuff, and it's so boring. If you've been a developer for 30 years, it is you've got no idea how boring it is listening to a lot of this rubbish that goes on in these places. So a lot of this could be sort of knocked on the head, and we should have had by now far better direction from Minister Nick Smith, the Minister for the Environment, who has done actually nothing through this whole term except producing more bureaucratic mush with what he did last October with the Competitive Cities document, which I really slammed him for at the time on Interestco New Zealand. But this government over all these issues has been too scared to do anything. I don't know what the matter is, and I suspect a lot of it goes back to Mr Key, the corporate bureaucrat.
Let's just actually think about one of the biggest surprise, which, it is to me, is that some of our most respected business leaders have started to speak out. And I've always referred to them as an old boys club, but they have started to speak out against some of the lack of communications, the lack of process, the lack of impotence that they need to get on to build a heart. Do Do you think it's fair with some of the comments that
it's
come
excellent,
out?
and I was very, I must take my hat off too. Just recently to Don Elder there at the energy company. Thank heavens for that. But I'm a businessman too, Joe. So I think that a lot of these guys should be a lot braver, and they really need to be. Business people have got a particular role to play in the community too. So often people mightn't like what we have to say or whatever, but we have a responsibility to say often what needs to be said, hopefully, and we need to take those sort of that role rather seriously. So I was really pleased to see Don Elder and Peter Townsend at the Chamber come out the other day, give us some guidance regarding the Chief Executive of the Council, and also these other people, this other group led by Bird, and good on them.
But I mean, Tony Merritt's been there for a while, and it's the first kind of ripples that we've had. So you're trying to look underneath what's going on here. Obviously, they're not happy with the leadership or who's running the city.
That's correct. And Mr. Merritt had difficulties up at Hamilton, which have just come to light in the press, as we know, just recent times, but which most of us who have had a lot of council involvement or local authority involvement were aware of for a very, very long time. Let's just say in the kindest possible terms, Joe, that where the city is going forward and we have to move to this service centre model, Mr. Merritt is not the right guy for that job, and we need to get somebody in who can actually do that job.
The CE job, of course, is one of the most important in the cities, and there seems to be lacking that social cohesion, and there seems to be lacking any kind of charisma or leadership within the community from Tony Merritt. Is that fair? That's what I seem to be reading.
Yes, of course, his job as a chief executive, and really the person fronting the council, generally speaking, should be the mayor. And of course, Bob Parker is a very experienced media guy, and I've had some great run-ins with Bob over the many sort of issues over the years, but one has got to admire his ability to communicate.
You believe it, to communicate or to say what he thinks people want to hear?
Yes, well, I think sometimes that Bob could do with a lot of help on the scripting front, let's say, and a good chief executive would be able to help him on that.
But aren't they, I think that, I'm going to flesh this out, there are a lot of criticism is about the lack of communication or what they're not saying or the way they're saying it. That's not good communication. That's a front. That's a veneer. Yes,
well, that's exactly right. And people can draw their own conclusions about Bob Parker and whether he's got any substance or he hasn't. That's not for me to sort of analyse, if you like, Bob Parker. But I think that where he is really in a very weak position is that he hasn't really got the managerial support in there to help him to get sound messages out.
Well, he thinks he has. He thinks
yes, but unfortunately Bob's misjudged the whole situation. The information that we're getting out of that council is not of a good quality.
Do you think going back to the business leaders, there seems to be a split now? You've got the Chambers of Commerce that kind of seem to be, reiterating the government's messages, but now you have, as I said, these respected men speaking out and they aren't happy. Do we run the risk of undermining the work that actually has to happen in the CBD and in wider Christchurch?
No, I'm very heartened, Joe, by these business people such as Peter Townsend and others, and Don Elder, of course, and also this new business group that's been formed, getting more active and showing interest in these issues. And I think it'd be fair enough to say that we're all more, if you like, on the same page. So that's something I really welcome.
Do you think the City Council has the capability and capacity to handle the present planning processes that have? You don't?
No, not the way it's currently structured. No, it's just far too bureaucratised. And that's not actually criticising, if you like, Joe, the staff in there. But as these bureaucracies become so big, what really happens is they become immobilised. And you've often got good people at the bottom trying to do their best, and they have to get decisions from higher up. And somewhere up the food chain, somebody says no, and then it's all back to square one again. What we have to move is away from this big bureaucratised model back into the communities so that we can all see exactly what the council is doing at the community level.
Just briefly, are you worried about all the architects that are involved in the planning process?
Well, architects do bother me getting involved in planning issues. The last thing the city needs at the moment are romantics like architects. This is going to be engineers and developers sorting a lot of this out. Thanks very much, Joe.
No, that was good. It's really good to discuss those things with you. But do you get a feeling that have a say is a good process, or just a do good, feel good PR exercise?
Well, essentially it is a fairly do-good, feel-good exercise, and what sort of saddens me a little bit about that too is that it's sort of creating the impression in people's minds that they're going to have a great influence on how, if you like, the city is going to be built. I'm a developer, Joe, and I can sit here now, if you ask me exactly how it's going to be built, and I've had 30 years experience, I'd have to say I don't have a clue at the moment, because we've got...
We need to wind that up, and thank you very much, and I'm sure we're going to watch with great interest what has happened and for Christchurch today. Thank you for listening to Hugh and I.